This is a scope very close to my heart. This was many years in development, and it's the new generation 8 to 80. Now, this has got astonishing IQ. The image quality on this scope is second to none. And when I first looked through that scope, and I've looked through a lot of scopes, there was a big wow. I mean, it was just the field of view, the quality, the IQ, and all the features they've built into this scope. So not only have we got 8 to 80 zoom, you've got locking turrets, you've got very clear turrets, very nice engraving, very simple to read windage. For F-Class, we want to know where we are in windage. We dial mostly, we don't hold that often, and when we do, we want precise hold. So we've got a range of specifically designed reticules for F-Class, and there are reticules that basically dictate how the shooter uses them and are particular to that shooter. I quite like a simple ret, but with subtensions. Tim, on the other hand, uses a different reticule, and that has been very cleverly designed, and that is to hold on targets in varying conditions. But I mean, the main features, I say, is the optic quality, the zoom ratio, and the way that it actually operates. The point of aim, there's no shift on it, it's repeatable, it just works. And the first time I used this scope, I was lucky enough to win with it, and I've done pretty well with it ever since. And I know Tim took this to the Arizona State, and he won it.
Yeah, that just happened.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Okay, and like Gary said, this scope is kind of near and dear to my heart too. Way back in the day, once upon a time in the fall of 2022, March had a prototype scope of the Majesta. This was over 5 years in the making, like Gary talked about, and that was the year I got lucky with the long-range national championship in the United States with that prototype.
Not so much luck.
Well, I would tell you, there's always some luck involved. I still feel like to this day, the scope in that specific tournament was a deciding factor. Of course, everything has to go your way. Gary already spoke to it. The field of view in the scope for an F-Class competitor at the standard target spacings in the United States, when you have the zoom up to 80x, you'll be able to see your target, and you'll be able to see the 10 ring on the competitor left and the 10 ring on the competitor right. So with that enhanced field of view at that high magnification, it's a great combination of being able to watch target trends of your competitors in terms of varying conditions, but then at 80x be able to have the highest level of precision aiming discernment in order to drive those high X counts and those liner 10s that you need as a competitor to win. Later in the day, as the conditions degrade, or perhaps the wind comes up even more, and you want to have more target view, if you pull this magnification back to 40, now at the standard US target spacing, you're not only going to see your entire target, but you're going to see two targets left, two entire targets left, and two entire targets right. So you're going to see 5 total targets. That's a lot of available information to you as a competitor in 1,000-yard F-Class competition. Gary already spoke to it. The engineers that worked on this, there's a very specific lens array coatings that allow for the attribute of what they call a shimmer control. So on that match 3, where the target resolution and clarity becomes fairly poor at some times because of heat waves coming off the ground, having coatings and images and lenses that were designed from the get-go to present the shooter with the cleanest, most presentable image possible, that can be the competitive difference at times. Gary already spoke to it too. Your top 1% competitors in all these disciplines are checking the scopes. It's an often thing to assume everything is broken until it's proven otherwise. These scopes, of all the March scopes I've checked on scope checkers and tracking and tall target tests, these scopes I've just never had one that had even a 0.1% in tracking error, and none have had a POI shift or a POI shift when the zoom ratio was changed. And somehow they did all this, and you have a fairly forgiving eye box back here. So when you come out to look at a spotting scope, or you come out to look at a flag, or you come out to look at another wind indicator, and then you come back in the scope, you can rapidly reacquire the aiming image through the scope and break that clean winning shot. I can't say enough about the scope. Amazing scope.
And you two are running separate reticles, correct?
Yes.
What's the name of the two reticles you guys?
So I run a MTR W1, and Tim runs the
MTR WFD.
WFD.
The WFD, yeah, and like Gary spoke to, I've shot a W1 reticle for quite a while. I think 8 months during a test and evaluation period. These reticles are very much personal preference. They're basically a tool to allow you to get the most out of the scope, and that's why March offers a very, very diverse reticle listing in this scope to try to appeal to the application and the specific user.
So your W1 reticle is very simple. It's crosshair with a dot, but it has subtensions on it. And the really cool thing about it is you've got a 3/32 dot, and the first subtension in the reticule is quarter MOA. And this is on 40 power because this is a second focal scope. So the zoom will affect the subtension value. However, on 40 power, you've got a really nice, clear, wide picture. You can see other targets. You've got intelligence downrange, and you can hold in the center of the V-ball to the edge of the V-ball without having to click. Now, some guys like to click, but I don't click for 1/8 or 1/4. I like to move that around. So you can confidently hold in the V-ball, see where you're going, and then basically move back again to the center. And the same as you go across the simple subtensions in the reticule. So it's really easy. It's a no-brainer. You don't have to think too much. I don't like to think too much when I'm shooting because I've got loads of other things that are worrying me, mainly the wind, mainly time and all the other things that are going on. Now with the WFD, that has some really unique features, and it was thought about in considerable detail. So Tim, do you want to just quickly give us a rundown on that?
You bet. There's some consumer education that goes into great detail on the WFD with that Denny and myself did with a voiceover. But to quickly boil it down, when we initially saw this scope and what its capabilities were, the thought process was, let's design a reticle that goes with like a 3-match format and allows us to get everything out of the scope. So with match 1 being the match expectation of clean with 14, 15, or even more X's, 16 X's plus now, that's where the center of the reticle plays in with kind of a circular peep sight kind of scenario for rapid target acquisition and maybe very small subtle holds. The next part of the reticle would be into match 2, where you're into the 5 to 10 mile an hour range, and now you're holding somewhere between 2 to 3 rings. And you're starting to have a little bit of image disparity and image distortion, vertical. So now there's a horizontal stadia both in above and below the standard 72-inch frame at 1,000 that allows you to hold yourself vertically without having to try to slice a circle when you're holding off.
Like this.
Yeah. And then finally the last match, obviously not all ranges encounters, but there are some ranges, by midday, the wind can be quite violent. It could be 15, 20, 30 miles an hour and switching. And so now shooters will often introduce a wind bias to the scope. And oftentimes those matches are only 2-siders. So if they introduce the wrong wind bias and they buy in on the wrong wind condition, it can become bewildering and the shooter can become lost. That part of the reticle is meant for you to be able to count out from the center and try before you buy, would be the quote. Say, before I put 2 MOA on the scope, I'm going to hold 2 MOA wind bias and see where that puts me on the target. Now they have that second sider to go ahead and put 2 MOA on the target. Now they can hold center, and it kind of just helps them again. The other part of the reticle allows you to hold off on your competitor's target 9 or 10 ring at the 80 or 40x zoom, respectively, to help with the vertical as well. So, like Gary said, the W1, simple, easy, effective like a hammer. The WFD would be a little more complicated, a little more of a slide rule computer reticle, and they have reticle choices that are really all in between.
Many others available.